If it's Monday, global unrest not taking a break for the holidays. China sending warplanes toward Taiwan and what the White House is calling a provocative move. Ukraine wants Russia out of the United Nations Security Council, and North Korea violates South Korean airspace, prompting a military response. Plus, the death toll from that massive winter storm is rising. More than 50 people were killed in more than a dozen states. We're going to talk to the mayor of hard-hit Buffalo, New York, where search and rescue operations are still underway after an historic blizzard, and the snow is still falling. And in the midst of the bitter cold, busloads of migrants, including young children, were dropped off in Washington, D.C. this weekend, many of them unprepared for freezing temperatures, as officials prepare for the Supreme Court to end the Title 42 border policy. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker. As much of the country is digging out from the winter storm and dealing with the travel chaos caused by the weather, there are escalating tensions of a different kind in several of the world's hotspots today, all of which will be top of the agenda for President Biden in the new year, as the White House contends with the ongoing war in Ukraine and the deepening ties between Russia and China. A spokesman for the White House National Security Council is calling out China for, quote, provocative and destabilizing moves after China flew 71 warplanes and sent 7 ships near Taiwan this weekend. Beijing says the massive show of force was a response to the U.S. defense spending bill that Congress passed last week, which included $10 billion over the next 5 years to help modernize Taiwan's military. Meanwhile, tensions also flared on the nearby Korean peninsula as 5 North Korean drones entered South Korean airspace, forcing South Korea to scramble fighter jets as one drone flew near the capital of Seoul. And in Ukraine, just days after Zelensky's visit to the U.S., which coincided with the announcement that the U.S. will send a Patriot missile system to Ukraine and the passage of a bill that provides nearly $45 billion in aid to Ukraine. Ukraine's foreign minister now says the country is aiming for a peace summit in February. But it comes at the same time as Ukraine is calling for the removal of Russia from the UN following a Christmas Eve attack in the Kherson region that killed 10 people and injured 68 others. Joining me now for the latest on those global challenges is NBC's Matt Bradley in Kyiv, Ukraine. Also with me is NBC's Raf Sanchez from London. And I want to start with you, Matt. Talk to me a little bit about this news that we are getting. The news that Putin is signaling he may be ready to sit down and talk. What are officials in Ukraine making of that, given the fact that the attacks go on in Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, we heard from Mikhail Polodiak, and he's the top advisor to President Zelensky. He immediately sort of laughed off that suggestion. This really only 24 hours before the Associated Press was reporting those comments from the foreign minister. So, you know, it looks like we're getting sort of 2 competing messages. But if you read into those comments from the foreign minister, he's saying that Russia might not be invited to that peace conference that you just mentioned, that he's proposing holding at the UN before the end of February. So a lot of cross currents here, and it's not entirely clear what's going on. What is clear is that Vladimir Putin has suggested this before. The Ukrainian government has laughed it off before, and negotiations have happened before. Remember, there were negotiations just in the opening months of this fight. Back in March, they failed miserably, and that was around the time that Ukrainian officials discovered the atrocities that happened in Bucha, which is right outside where I am now in Kyiv. When I've spoken with Ukrainian government officials, they said that when they saw those mass killings, when they saw the horror that happened to civilians outside of the capital, they were no longer interested in negotiating. And I haven't heard them really changing their tune since, even with this new news today about a proposed peace conference at the UN.
So given that, Matt, and given all of your reporting on the ground there, do you get the sense that Ukraine is bracing for more attacks in the Kherson region?
Yeah, well, we heard that from President Zelensky. And in fact, you know, that he's saying that there could be more attacks over the coming week. The fact that we just saw that drone attack deep inside Russian territory that killed 3 Russian servicemen, that's the kind of thing that Russia tends to retaliate against. And of course, when he must have seen President Zelensky in that historic trip to Washington greeting policymakers in the U.S., getting those rapturous rounds of applause. That probably rankled Putin as well. It's kind of hard to attach specific bombing raids to specific events because the fact of the matter is, Kristen, we see waves of attacks all the time. They don't really stop, and they're not necessarily timed for any particular occasion. But it really seems certain that given the fact that we haven't actually seen any massive missile attacks, especially here in the capital, for the past several weeks, it's probably about time. We're probably going to see some in the coming days or a week or two. The only thing really that would be stopping them is just the lack of supplies, the lack of missiles that Russia might be facing. And that's why we start hearing, talk about them going to North Korea, going to Iran, trying to resupply their stock of missiles because they've been pummeling this country so much. It's no surprise they're running out of missiles.
And of course, all of your reporting just underscoring the skepticism that Vladimir Putin would be serious about negotiating. Thank you so much, Matt Bradley. Really appreciate it. Raf Sanchez, I want to turn to you. You have been tracking the increased tensions between China and Taiwan, particularly in the wake of the U.S. Signing that spending bill to bolster Taiwan's military. What is the very latest? And tell us why this moment is so concerning for U.S. officials.
Yeah, Kristen, this is very, very worrying. China has been consistently furious about two components of the spending bill. One is that $10 billion in direct military assistance over 5 years to Taiwan that you mentioned. The U.S. has for decades sold weapons to Taiwan, but this is the first time that the U.S. is directly giving Taiwan money for its military, the way the U.S. does with other major allies like Israel, like Ukraine recently. And two, this bill is designed to fast-track the delivery of American weapons systems to Taiwan. The Taiwanese consistently complain that they put in an order and it can be years and years until they actually have the weapons in their hands. Kristen, I was in Taiwan in September, and one of the things we heard consistently from Taiwanese officials is they need weapons now, before the shooting starts. Taiwan is an island. It is not like Ukraine. The U.S., Western allies, are going to have a very difficult time resupplying Taiwan if it is under Chinese attack, under Chinese blockade. And so they say they need these stockpiles right now. Now, the escalation we've seen over the last 24 hours is so very significant. 71 aircraft, Chinese aircraft, heading towards Taiwan in a 24-hour period. That is the largest kind of exercise we have seen since Speaker Pelosi was back in Taiwan in August, which so outraged the Chinese. The Taiwanese taking this very seriously. They say this underscores why they need these weapons. And as you said, the White House is calling this a provocative act which risks miscalculations and undermines regional peace and stability. Kristen.
And part of the concern is that tensions seem to be rising throughout the region, right? Because we are also tracking these renewed provocations by North Korea, sending a drone into South Korean airspace, and then South Korea responding to that. What can you tell us about that escalation?
Yeah, Kristen. So North Korea, for the first time in 5 years, really brazenly violating South Korea's airspace using drones, relatively small drones, about 6 feet long. They appear to be unarmed. One of those drones flew right to the edge of Seoul, the South Korean capital. That caused a lot of alarm on the ground. 2 civilian airports were ordered by the military to stop takeoffs for an hour or so, which is a scary moment if you are at that airport, your flight is about to leave, and you're told they're unaccounted for North Korean drones. Now, the South scrambled both fighter jets and helicopters. One of those helicopters opened fire on the drones. They weren't able to take them down, and one South Korean jet actually crashed in the process, the pilots ejecting safely. Kristen.
All right. Well, we know that Washington and, frankly, the rest of the world watching that situation quite closely. Raf and Matt, beforehand, thank you both for your great reporting. And while the Biden administration is managing those foreign crises, it's also facing many pressure and pressing issues at home, including the end of a pandemic-era border policy known as Title 42. The policy that bars nearly all migrant crossings is now in the hands of the Supreme Court, which could open the border to asylum seekers as early as tomorrow. But as border officials wait for the court to act, the White House is blaming Texas Governor Greg Abbott for sending several buses of migrants to Washington this weekend, dropping 140 people, including babies. and toddlers in front of the vice president's residence in the bitter cold on Christmas Eve. On Saturday night, temperatures reached as low as 10 degrees in the district. Just for context, as you can see in these videos, the migrants were not prepared for the weather. At least one man was even wearing shorts, and many arrived in flip-flops and sandals. An aid worker told NBC News others went without any shoes. Just staggering images there. NBC's Josh Letterman has more on the border crisis and the White House's response. So, Josh, we've seen these moments before, these migrants dropped off in various locations, but this moment seemed different. Talk a little bit about the response and, frankly, the backlash.
It seems different, Kristen, both because of the timing coming on Christmas Eve and, of course, the fact that it occurred as Washington and so much of the country was dealing with these freezing temperatures. What local aid groups who responded to the arrival of these migrants say is that these 3 busloads arrived carrying migrants who were largely from Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, that these buses were actually originally scheduled to bring them to New York, but were rerouted at the last minute because of the weather situation there and some of the road closures, meaning there was very little heads up for local humanitarian groups here in the Washington area to try to get to the Naval Observatory where the vice president lives and where these buses arrived to try to then meet these migrants, get them somewhere warm, get them clothes that, as you pointed out, they didn't necessarily have, and then on to the next step in their journey, which is obviously, far from an ideal situation when you have people who have been on a bus for more than 36 hours. And the concern really is, for folks who are not here in Washington, we've got a big train station. It's called Union Station. You can get a lot of places from there. Some of the previous migrant buses have brought them there so that they can then get further transportation. But the fact that these buses drop them off in essentially a residential neighborhood outside the vice president's house seemed, according to these aid groups, to be more of a political move, trying to basically make a political point and using these migrants as pawns as part of that political messaging.
Yeah, and while that is playing out and will undoubtedly be a big issue in the 2024 campaign, we know that Governor Greg Abbott potentially eyeing, one of the people eyeing a potential run. The White House is obviously bracing for the fact that the Supreme Court could lift Title 42 potentially as soon as tomorrow, Josh. And you know this, Republicans and even some Democrats, Mark Kelly, for example, the senator in Arizona, has criticized the administration, saying that they just don't have a plan in place to deal with Title 42 if it's lifted. Now, the White House has pushed back and said, yes, they do have a plan. But where do things stand?
Yeah, the White House says that there has been a lot of planning that has taken place at the various agencies that are involved in this, that the State Department, for example, is talking with the countries whose citizens are the ones who are showing up in the United States to try to coordinate with them, and that Homeland Security is preparing to surge resources to the region to build additional locations to house these migrants, as well as more transportation assets to move them, frankly, to deport them back to their countries of origin if this Title 42 is lifted. But the reality is that there doesn't appear to be a real comprehensive way, given the existing resources, for the administration to be able to deal with this surge. If they were able to do it, we would have expected that to happen quite a while ago, and we wouldn't necessarily be seeing these record-breaking numbers that we're seeing month after month, Kristen.
Yes, well, it is going to certainly be a major challenge if it does, in fact, happen. All right, Josh Letterman, thank you so much for covering all of those angles for us from the White House. Coming up, the most devastating winter storm in Buffalo's history. That's how Governor Hochul is describing the fatal blizzard that killed dozens of New Yorkers this weekend. The Buffalo mayor joins me next with the latest on the cleanup and search and recovery efforts. Plus, growing concerns about the security of the U.S. power grid after more incidents of vandalism at power stations, this time in Washington state. We'll delve into that. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The death toll from this week's powerful winter storm continues to climb. At least 57 people have been killed nationwide. Nearly half of those deaths, 27, were in Erie County, New York, which includes the city of Buffalo. Now, the snow is still falling there and is not expected to let up until tomorrow afternoon. The once-in-a-lifetime blizzard has already dumped more than 4 feet of snow in parts of the county, with winds topping 70 miles per hour. The National Guard is now helping with the emergency response. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, who tweeted these pictures of vehicles stuck on the road, says she spoke to President Biden about the situation in her state. She says she also sent a request for an emergency declaration to the White House. Erie County's executive called this the most devastating storm he has ever experienced.
It's hard for people to believe, but it was like looking at a white wall for 14 to 18 hours straight, depending where you were. 3 feet in front of you, at your just in front of your hood of your car, was nothing but a white wall. And as somebody who's lived here pretty much my entire life, who lived through the blizzard of '77, that 18-hour period was the worst period of weather I have ever seen.
Just terrifying to hear that description. NBC's Dasha Burns joins me now and is tracking this. So, Dasha, what are you hearing? What's the very latest there in terms of the efforts to both rescue people and get the power back on and resume operations as normal?
Yeah, well, Kristen, folks are still reeling after this holiday weekend when, you know, most were expecting to celebrate, to spend time with their families. Instead, we got a dangerous and deadly weekend here in New York State, where we hear harrowing stories of folks trapped in their cars, trapped in their homes, unable to get medical care when they needed it. Just for some context, according to the county executive, the ambulances there would take about 3 hours for a single hospital run because the conditions were just so dire. You mentioned the death toll, Kristen. We just found out just in the last few moments here that in Erie County there were an additional 2 deaths that have been discovered, bringing the death toll up to 27. Now, we're seeing that number tick up because these rescue efforts are still ongoing. This snowstorm just had such a massive impact. People are still needing help with their homes, their cars. Rescuers are trying to get to everyone that needs help. But a lot of folks also still without power. Kristen, thousands of people in these freezing temperatures across the state, but especially in Erie County there, without power as well. And some of them also finding out that they did lose loved ones who weren't able to make it through this storm. You heard there that folks in Buffalo, they are used to tough winters. They are no strangers to storms, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation kind of weather event, Kristen.
Well, Dasha, you take me to my next question, because you think about Buffalo and you think about a community that is used to dealing with really severe storms, and yet this is being described as historic. Can you give us a sense, what are officials saying about when they might have those roads cleared? I mean, did this just catch folks there off guard?
The severity was seemingly a surprise to a lot of folks. Like I said, people are used to storms, but this just hit so hard. There are still abandoned cars on the roads. Power lines are still down. We know that rescue crews are working around the clock nonstop to get roads clear and to get to anybody that still needs help. But in terms of an exact timeline, we don't have one here. Perhaps the mayor will have a better sense of that. But I'm sure it's going to take some time. This just created such a mess and so much devastation. The Buffalo airport, we also know, is shut down and will be shut down until Wednesday morning, Kristen.
Just unbelievable images there out of Buffalo. Dasha Burns, thank you so much. I am joined now by the mayor of Buffalo, New York, Byron Brown. Mayor, thank you so much for joining me. I believe we have you by phone. We are so sorry for everything that has happened in your community. Our condolences for all of the loss of life.
Thank you very much, Kristen. The loss of life has been very sad and very painful for our community, more than 20 individuals, and it is expected that that number is going to rise.
Can you give us a sense, and I'm so sorry to hear that the number will rise. Can you give us a sense of what people in your community should be bracing for right now, in addition to the death toll rising? What is the latest in terms of the efforts to rescue people? Are there still people who are trapped? Are there still people who need to get to the hospital? And what are the efforts to get the power back on?
Well, our main priority has been life safety. We have been going car by car, checking to see if people are trapped in vehicles. Got a number of 911 calls from individual stranded motorists who were trapped in vehicles. We were able to literally assist hundreds of people in different ways that were trapped that needed assistance. We're plowing streets to get to people that have emergency medical situations. We've had a couple of fires where we've had to plow streets to get fire trucks to be able to respond. And we've been working very closely with our power company, National Grid, to plow areas where power stations are located, residential areas that the power company needs to get into to be able to restore power. At one time, we had over 20,000 households without power in the city. We've been able to work with National Grid and reduce that number to just over 8,000 now. And we continue with better conditions today to work very aggressively to help National Grid restore power citywide. Our goal is to get people's power restored as quickly as possible. We know that there are some households that have been without power for 4 days now.
Mayor, and obviously you are focused there on trying to get the power back on, trying to make sure that you are getting people the medical attention they need. You say the weather conditions are better, and they certainly are, and yet there is still snow falling. How much of an impediment is that to officials who are trying to get operations back up and running? And what message do you have for the people there in Buffalo? Do they need to stay home and let people do the work of getting the city back up and running again?
Still a travel ban in Buffalo. People need to stay home. Too many people out on the roads, too many people driving in the city. It's hampering the effort to get to stranded people, stranded motorists, hampering the effort to plow streets, to get to individuals that have health emergency situations. We need people to stay home so that we can plow streets, open up streets, and deliver critical emergency services that are needed. The snowfall is very light in the city of Buffalo right now. The snow ban has shifted outside of Buffalo, which has been very helpful. In fact, I'm with our police commissioner, Joseph Gramalia, right now, touring areas of the city, looking at road conditions and going to district police stations, thanking first responders for the work that they've been doing. We've had first responders, police, fire, city plow drivers, state workers, county workers, city workers, literally working across, working around the clock to help people in these very difficult storm conditions. The heaviest part of the blizzard was Friday and Saturday, and today we're getting better conditions that is helping us to move a little bit more quickly with plowing on main streets and getting into residential streets.
Mayor, we just have a few seconds left, but are you getting what you need from the state and federal government? And if not, what more do you need?
Working very closely with Governor Kathy Hochul and state government, getting all the resources that we need. I was with Governor Hochul earlier today when she received a call from President Biden, who informed the governor that he would be signing an emergency declaration for our community very quickly. So we're getting significant state assistance, and the federal government is providing assistance as well.
All right, Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown, we continue to keep your entire community in our thoughts as you continue to dig out and work to get things operational again in the wake of this massive winter storm. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kristen.
Turning now from the Northeast to the Pacific Northwest, where authorities are investigating attacks on 4 electricity substations in the Tacoma, Washington area yesterday. Investigators say someone broke into each of the facilities and vandalized the equipment. Now, it's not clear if the attacks were coordinated, but of course it comes less than a month after vandals attacked 2 substations in North Carolina, knocking out power to about 45,000 customers. Authorities have not released a motive in that attack, but there are growing concerns that the power grid is increasingly becoming a target for some domestic extremists. Coming up next, new year, new agenda. Steve Kornacki is at the big board with a look at what we learned from the 2022 midterms and what it means for both parties as we enter 2023. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. As President Biden prepares to confront a divided Congress in 2023 and presumably a presidential contest in 2024, he managed to close out 2022 on a better than expected note. Democrats ended this year celebrating a series of legislative successes as well as a midterm election where the party bucked expectations. With more on how those midterm results came about, NBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki joins us from where else? The big board.
All right, well, we started 2022 asking if there'd be a big Republican wave. We end 2022 knowing that there wasn't. Republicans do get control of the House, but they get it by a very slim margin, and they end up losing a Senate seat. So what happened? What did we learn from this midterm cycle? Well, one thing that I think really stands out is Joe Biden, Democrats had a good midterm cycle politically, relatively speaking, in spite of the unpopularity of the president, 44%. This number is from the exit poll on Election Day, only a 44% job approval rating for Biden. You know, we've been trained, we've seen in modern elections, this kind of number for a president in a midterm election has always, in modern times, meant political catastrophe for the president's party. I mean, just take a look here. These are recent presidents. This is their approval rating during midterm elections. Trump in 2018, Barack Obama in 14 and in 10, George W. Bush in 2006. Their approval ratings all basically right where Joe Biden's was this year. And you remember, 18 was a disaster for Republicans. They lost 40 seats in the House. 14 was a disaster for Democrats, especially on the Senate side. They lost 9 Senate seats. And that House 13-seat loss for Democrats in 2014, they didn't have that many seats left to lose. Otherwise, that number probably would have been bigger. 63-seat loss in 2010, 30-seat loss for Republicans, and big on the Senate side. This is what a low approval rating has meant in modern times. And Biden's number, a lot of Republicans were expecting, a lot of Democrats were fearing it was going to mean something similarly politically catastrophic, and yet it didn't. Why? What broke in Democrats' favor? Well, I think what really stands out is this. What you're looking at here is the independent vote in the midterm elections, and Democrats actually won the independent vote by 2 points. And all of these recent presidents we were just going through who had rough midterm elections, you see in their midterms, the independents broke for the opposition party by double digits. That's what we've kind of been conditioned to expect. If a president is unpopular, the independents go to the opposition party, and they do it in big numbers. They didn't do that this year, even though Biden still wasn't that popular. So let's dig into those numbers a little bit more. Let's take a look at independents. And again, I say Biden was not that popular. That was especially true, is especially true with independent voters. 60% of independents said in the exit poll they got an unfavorable view of Biden, a majority an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, Joe Biden, not popular with independents. But you can see it here. The Republican Party, and especially Donald Trump, even less popular, significantly less popular with independent voters. So I think you start to see here, we typically think of these midterm elections, it's a referendum on the president, a referendum on the president's party. That's typically how they've run. I think there was probably a referendum aspect here on the opposition party and the man who most recently led the opposition party this year. It's a dynamic you don't usually have in midterm elections. Also, take a look at this. When you ask, talk about the role of Donald Trump, his sort of lingering presence in the center stage of American politics, the January 6th hearings this summer, asking independent voters about the state of democracy. Nearly 3/4 said they feel democracy is threatened. And just look at how these voters split. Those independents who said democracy is threatened went for Democrats by a 16-point margin. Those who said they consider it secure voted for Republicans by a 6-point margin. And just a lot more independents said they considered democracy threatened. So an unusual result, an unpopular president and his party wins the independent vote and staves off what I think a lot of people that started this year expected to be a political disaster for Democrats. Instead, they gain a seat in the House and they come within 5 in the Senate, and they come within 5 of hanging on to the House.
Just fascinating analysis there, Steve Kornacki. Thank you. And joining me now to look ahead is our great panel, Democratic strategist Basil Smikle and Noah Rothman, editor at Commentary Magazine. Thanks so much to both of you for joining me on this Monday after Christmas. Hope you all are having a great holiday season. Basil, let's just start right there. You heard Steve Kornacki break down why this midterm election season was better than expected for Democrats. It had everything to do with independent voters. What does that mean moving forward? What are the lessons that you take from that?
Well, the lessons for me are very specifically that Democrat voters in this country wanted to get back to a sense of normalcy. That's what they elected Joe Biden to do. They were, I think, the concerns around threats to democracy were partly, in large part, a result of this uninterrupted narrative that Democrats were able to tell about what happened on January 6th and everything and everyone associated with that. Going forward, though, there are two concerns. One, that 2024 is likely to be a much worse year for Democrats in the Senate because there's so many seats that are up, number one. And then number two, something that I think is concerning not just nationally but locally. Take a state like New York, which is a blue state. The Democrats have the largest voting bloc, but the second highest voting bloc right now are independent voters. They outnumber Republicans in this state, which suggests to me that a lot of young voters, lapsed voters, new voters don't have that strong party affiliation, and then dips in popularity for a presidential candidate, for example, are going to resonate when we talk to a lot of these young voters. They saved us in 2022, but there's going to have to be a stronger appeal to them going forward. Otherwise, we lose those voters.
No, let me allow you to jump in here and also frame the question for you this way. Given the results of the midterm elections, do you think that Republicans and Democrats are going to be able to find some legislative common ground moving forward? Republicans take control of the House. Do you think there are lessons to be learned, for example, in these midterm election results? Or do you think we're just going to see more divided government?
I think we're going to see more divided government. There's always compromise legislation that moves in, even in closely divided Congresses. It's just not especially controversial, and therefore it kind of goes under the radar. The good governance stuff doesn't make the primetime reel. It's the sort of thing that we focus on, but maybe not necessarily those who are engaged in political combat. Basil's absolutely correct. The notion here that Republicans will do better based on the map in 2024 assumes, however, that they do learn the lessons of 2022. We have begun to see some indications that Republicans are prepared to understand what Basil very clearly laid out, that voters now for 2 consecutive cycles have zoomed in on candidates who, without any conventionality to them, and also even kind of rejected conventionality, like it's a species of complacency, homed in on them like a guided munition and got them out of the political scene. The extent to which you're not seeing a lot of people latch onto, for example, Carrie Lake's narrative in Arizona, that she believes she's got this lost election, this wound that she is trying to salve, that's not really catching on in the way that Donald Trump's claims about 2020 represented the price of admission into national Republican politics. It has begun to fade in resonance and suggests perhaps that the Republican Party is catching on to why it has such an unhappy lot.
I want to talk about one of the issues that is looming large over the Biden administration and, frankly, over the next presidential race as well. That's the issue of immigration. Title 42 could potentially be struck down tomorrow by the Supreme Court. We'll have to see what happens. But, Noah, talk about the implications of that. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be an appetite to deal with the broader underlying issues of immigration or any real ability for the two sides to work together on this issue to fix, what are the root causes of it with some big sweeping piece of legislation. And so you're seeing these little, what each side might describe as a Band-Aid and flashpoints.
That's exactly right. Congress has had ample opportunity to deal with some of the legislative matters that that become controversies in themselves. Under the Trump administration, we had a kerfuffle around the Flores settlement, which compels you to do certain things with families who cross the border, and it became a cause célèbre because the Trump administration was using this as a deterrent, according to the head of the Department of Homeland Security, to deter people by removing children, and that became the narrative of kids in cages. Now, it was an unfair narrative because Congress has the capacity to address the Flores settlement and chose not to. Likewise, we have a pandemic-related policy in Title 42. It's an emergency policy, which is justified by the continuing state of emergency that the Biden administration has extended into 2023. Maybe that's dubious to you or not. The policy itself clearly doesn't deserve to be pandemic policy. It is appreciated almost across the board, especially at the state level in these border states. It's something that should graduate perhaps from being an emergency policy into actual policy, and that requires congressional action. Controversial as that may be, Congress does have a job to do.
Basil, what's your take on this? And do you think, I mean, we have been for decades discussing whether Washington will actually be able to deal with the issue of immigration.
They're not. And Noah is right. This has been a political football for, decades. I'm a child of immigrants. I teach students here in New York. Most of the students I teach are children of immigrants. So as I talk about where young people are and how they view the parties and their desire to affiliate with one of them, this is one of the issues where they feel that no one has actually done justice to the policy. The mayor of New York City is talking about now $1 billion needed annually to be able to deal with this crisis. New Yorkers do what New Yorkers do as more and more buses roll in. But the reality is that they are now, the New York City officials, for example, are now complaining that the Biden administration isn't doing enough to support their efforts. And so when you have Democrats calling out other Democrats in this particular political environment, there's a problem. And my fear is that it's not going to get solved anytime soon. And what we're seeing is the politics of cruelty. This is humane treatment. And I think both parties need to come together to talk about what it is to be an American, because it's a terrible example that we're showing these migrants.
Well, we will be watching closely to see what, if anything, the Supreme Court does tomorrow. And of course, this is an issue, again, that is going to loom large over 2024. It comes as President Biden is making his final decisions about whether he's going to officially announce he's running again, and as you have a number of Republican potential candidates having serious discussions themselves. Basil and Noah, thank you for a great conversation. Still to come, the Taliban's new prohibition on women working for aid organizations is the latest blow to women's rights and threatens to worsen an already dire humanitarian crisis in a country where millions of people don't have enough to eat. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Meet the Press first premiered 75 years ago on November 6th, 1947. Since then, 13 presidents have answered questions on Meet the Press. Herbert Hoover, and then every president since Kennedy. 8 of those presidents appeared during or after their time in the White House. Here's a look at that incredible history, beginning with former President Richard Nixon, reflecting on his mistakes while in office.
In the autumn of your years, as you are reflective about your own life's experiences, personal and as a politician, what criticism do you have with your own behavior or style or things that you've done?
As president?
As president or as a human being?
Well, we don't have much time to cover the human being. Let's start with the president. First, naturally, the Watergate matter should have been handled properly. I should have concentrated on it. And apart from the fact that it was wrong, it was stupid. And generally, I'm called many things, but not often am I called stupid.
The country has gone through, in the last year and a half, some very difficult times. We went through the problems of Watergate. We have been suffering from a very serious economic recession, although we're coming out of it very steadily. We've had a traumatic experience in Southeast Asia. All of these and perhaps some other problems raise some doubts in the American people as to whether their government their form of government, was capable of meeting these kind of challenges. This doubt, I think, has been considerably reversed, and I think that's extremely encouraging. They know that honesty and candor has been restored in government.
Mr. President, assuming the Soviets do not pull out of Afghanistan anytime soon, do you favor the U.S. participating in the Moscow Olympics? And if not, what are the alternatives?
No, neither I nor the American people would support the sending of an American team to Moscow with Soviet invasion troops in Afghanistan. I've sent a message today to the United States Olympic Committee spelling out my own position that unless the Soviets withdraw their troops within a month from Afghanistan, that the Olympic Games be moved from Moscow to an alternate site or multiple sites, or postponed or canceled.
Do you think we do a good job? Have we been fair to you?
On balance, yes. I think, first of all, I don't think there's ever been a president of either party and any philosophy that didn't think that he should have gotten a better press. So that just goes with the territory. I think there have been rather dramatic changes in press coverage over the last 20 years, particularly in the Washington press, which bears some examination and evaluation by those of you who are in the press. But I don't think that the president gets anywhere by making any comments on the press.
Do you believe if you had gone to the Congress and said he should be removed because he's a threat to his people, but I'm not sure he has weapons of mass destruction, Congress would authorize war?
I went to Congress with the same intelligence. Congress saw the same intelligence I had. And they looked at exactly what I looked at. And they made an informed judgment based upon the information that I had. The same information, by the way, that my predecessor had. And all of us, made this judgment that Saddam Hussein needed to be removed.
In light of not finding the weapons of mass destruction, do you believe the war in Iraq is a war of choice or a war of necessity?
I think that's an interesting question. Please elaborate on that a little bit. A war of choice or a war of necessity? I mean, it's a war of necessity. My judgment, we had no choice when we look at the intelligence I looked at that says the man was a threat.
President Bush, what did you learn in your government's response to the tsunami, to the disaster response to Katrina? What lessons did you learn that this administration should bear in mind?
First of all, it takes time to get the supplies in place. But that shouldn't deter them. In other words, there's an expectation amongst people that things are going to happen quickly. And sometimes it's hard to make things happen.
Why does it take a disaster of this scale and magnitude away from the United States to create this kind of bipartisanship?
Well, I think that when something like this happens inside the United States, we act in the same way. I think that it reminds us of our common humanity. It reminds us of needs that go beyond fleeting disagreements, that whatever our policy disputes are don't seem to matter much when people are dying.
You got to go to Syria in some form or another. You've ruled out boots on the ground. And I'm curious, have you only ruled them out simply for domestic political reasons, or is there another reason you've ruled out American boots on the ground? Because your own guys have said you can't defeat ISIS with airstrikes alone.
Well, they're absolutely right about that. But you also cannot, over the long term or even the medium term, deal with this problem by having the United States serially occupy various countries all around the Middle East. We don't have the resources. It puts enormous strains on our military. And at some point we leave and then things blow up again.
Well, that's what happened with Iraq.
So we've got to have a more sustainable strategy, which means the boots on the ground have to be Iraqi.
What about
the boots
Syria?
And in Syria, the boots on the ground have to be Syrian.
You were always hard on Obama. You thought he wasn't enough of a cheerleader.
He was not a cheerleader.
If you could have one do-over as president, what would it be?
Well, it would be personnel. I would
it?
say if I had one do-over, it would be I would not have appointed Jeff Sessions to be Attorney General.
All extraordinary moments and interviews on Meet the Press. All right, well, We will have much more of the iconic moments from the 75-year history of Meet the Press all week long, including history-making interviews with world leaders, civil rights icons, and political candidates. Coming up next, Congress ends its term without a plan for the tens of thousands of Afghan refugees who were brought to the U.S. during those chaotic weeks before the fall of Kabul. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. For the second time in a week, the Taliban issued harsh new restrictions on women over the weekend, ordering non-government organizations to stop women from coming to work. A spokesperson for Afghanistan's economic ministry tells NBC News it's received complaints about women at NGOs not adhering to strict dress codes. The announcement came days after the Taliban banned women from attending universities. Thomas West, the U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan, condemned the latest move, tweeting, "The Taliban's decree barring women from working to deliver humanitarian aid is profoundly irresponsible. It poses mortal risks to millions who depend on life-saving assistance. The Taliban is ignoring their most basic responsibilities to their people." And meanwhile, tens of thousands of refugees who fled Afghanistan in 2021 are now at risk of being sent back to live under Taliban rule when their humanitarian parole expires next year. The omnibus spending bill that passed last week did not include a provision to help evacuees become permanent residents, leaving over 70,000 Afghan refugees in legal limbo. I'm joined now by Krish Omara Vignarajee, president of the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. Krish, thank you so much for joining me to discuss all of this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Can you first, before we dive into what all of this means for refugees, just respond and react to this latest move by the Taliban banning women from not only attending universities but serving with NGOs?
I wish I could say it's unprecedented, but when I served as First Lady Michelle Obama's policy director, I led an initiative called Let Girls Learn, and we've seen the Taliban do this before. They claim that these are delays, but they turn into years-long pauses for children who, what it means is that we lose a generation of children who are not taught simply because they are girls.
For the refugees, particularly women who could be deported back to Afghanistan, what's your biggest fear given these latest bans?
I mean, what we're seeing from the Taliban is it's reprehensible. And the reality that for so many who came to this country on America's promise, the prospect of women and girls being returned, for soldiers who served alongside our U.S. military, protecting their lives, to fear the uncertainty that comes sometime next year or the year after, that they'll be returned to harm's way. It's very difficult to swallow. The glaring omission of the Afghan Adjustment Act in last week's spending bill is a historic failure, and it is yet another missed opportunity to keep our nation's promise of protection to the allies of America's longest war.
Who do you blame, and why didn't this get done? And I hear what you're saying, that this is an historic failure. Why do you think it is so difficult for the two sides to come together on this issue?
It's a great question, and honestly, it's a difficult one to answer because we had bipartisan support, veterans groups, faith leaders, refugee resettlement agencies. The Afghan Adjustment Act is more than a bill before Congress. It really cuts to the core question of whether the U.S. keeps its promises of protection to its allies. And, I know there had been some concerns raised about vetting, but the Afghan Adjustment Act was specifically designed so that these individuals, as they were applying for permanent status, would go through yet another layer of vetting so that they'd go through the most extreme vetting of any immigrants who come to this country.
Republicans are obviously set to take control of the House. We will see divided government. Do you have any expectation that this is going to get done with this new Congress? And what is your message to lawmakers?
It has to. It's why passing the Afghan Adjustment Act is so critical, because it does access long-term protection. But this is really a ticking clock. And I think my argument to political leaders is This is how we keep our promise. This is how we make sure that the next war we need to wage has local support. It is why we get a full-throated, support from national security officials. So we need to put politics aside and realize that this is about people. This is about America's security.
Is our system equipped finally to deal with the 70,000 Afghans who are here, who are seeking permanent status, who don't yet have it?
I think so. I mean, bear in mind that we, by law, for the special immigrant visas, were required to process them in 9 months. The problem is that when the Biden administration took power, there was a 17,000 backlog that was created by the Trump administration. And so we've had to rev up our processing. But certainly in terms of what agencies like mine have done, we resettled 14,000 just last year. We have the capacity, and we need to make sure that we do complete this mission because it's not over.
All right, Krish Vignarajah, thank you so much for your perspective. As always, it is always so good to hear from you. And thank you for being with us this hour. I will be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. NBC News Now coverage continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.